Hey, everybody, welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I am your host, Chris Bello, and really excited today to bring a friend on the show who is Dr. Amit Koduri. So, Dr. Koduri, is that how people just say it? Doctor? They call you
Yeah,
doctor?
it's so weird now because it feels more natural to be called Dr. Kaduri than it is to be called like Mr. Kaduri.
Yeah, that's so strange and for those listening, this is actually an old friend of mine. We used to play in a band together and so I would just be like, hey, Amit, let's go jam at our friend's place. And so now it's like, oh,
Yes.
doctor, which is pretty legit. So I'm excited to have you on the show, man. Thank you so much. And we actually had a phone call this morning and we said, why don't we just jump on a Zoom call and talk about some stuff and share some information with our audience. So
Oh yeah,
welcome to the
absolutely.
show.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I guess if you want to give a quick background on yourself, and I know we were going to talk a little bit about the mindset stuff because I thought it would be a really good fit because med school is definitely by no means easy, I would imagine, and I've never been through it, but it's a long process. You have to stay committed and you have to stay persistent over a long period of time, which is very relevant to an entrepreneurial journey. And I also thought because of the whole coronavirus current situation, we can talk a little bit about that and anything you recommend as well. So yeah, feel free to give us the long or the short version of your life up to this point.
So let me start off by saying it's so nice to see how motivated and ambitious you've become and how successful you've become over the years.
Thank you.
Because
Likewise, man. Likewise. I
yeah,
love successful friends, man. Just
yeah, I
hungry.
mean, we go back probably like 15 plus years maybe.
Yeah.
And a lot of things have just definitely changed since then. So I went to high school at St. Thomas Episcopal in Houston, and that's where I knew Chris. But I did my undergrad at UCLA and did my med school at UT Southwestern in Dallas, and then ended up going to residency out here in Athens, Georgia. And about a couple months ago, I just found out that I'll be starting cardiology fellowship over in UT Houston. So I basically come full circle. Um,
Back to
but
Houston. Yep.
but I'm super excited for whatever else is left to come, and also to be closer to my family and friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know you've been on this journey for forever, and there was a time you came and visited. I think you visited me over in College Station. You came over one weekend or
Yeah.
something, and then
Yep.
you were in town in Houston, and we hung out. So we have seen each other a few times over the years, and even stayed over one time. Remember, we went out in Houston. We went out for like
Yeah.
one of our birthdays or something.
Yeah. It was your
So
birthday. We went to a Mexican restaurant
yeah, it was
for
my
dinner,
birthday.
and then
We
we
went
went
to a
out
Mexican
afterwards.
restaurant and we went out. And I think I was still living at that apartment, Amley 2121 in
Uh
Houston.
huh.
So
Yep. Yep. That
we
was a
have
nice
gotten a
place.
chance. Yeah, that was a nice place, right? We got a chance to hang out a few times over the years, but I know you've been very focused on your studies. So now full circle, you're going to be coming back to Houston. And of course, things are kind of like up in the air a little bit with the current situation we're dealing with.
Hmm. Yeah. So COVID-19, it's definitely caused a lot of disruption, a lot of panic, a lot of frenzy, and just as much as it is a pandemic, it's also a panicdemic. I would say totally for everyone. Um,
Panicdemic. I haven't heard that phrase yet. I have heard like a pandemic of or a fear pandemic as well. And I
mhm.
guess I heard somebody else also mentioning that what's also as contagious as the virus itself is the fear because people just spread fear rapidly and that's when chaos
Oh,
and panic
yeah,
breaks out
absolutely.
overall.
Masks have become like gold essentially in our society because they're so
Right.
difficult to procure. And then later on, we started to see things that became less relevant to the disease that were starting to get hoarded or bought up. I mean, hand sanitizer totally makes sense, but then when you start getting toilet paper, you start scratching your head, and then
Then you
in
start
this
scratching
society,
something else when you run out, right?
yeah, exactly. People just really have felt this urge to get a sense of control over a situation that, for the most part, they felt they had absolutely no control over. And
Right.
so that was kind of this beginning of the frenzy. And hopefully, what's happened is that we've reached the peak of the panic earlier than we've reached the peak of the virus. So that way, we're prepared and thinking clearly once we're attacking this head on.
Absolutely. So I guess I wanted to share real quick with the audience just some things that we talked about because I know there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of news channels that are just trying to spew fear, and then there's a lot that are giving some bits of truth. So from what you've seen, being an actual doctor that has seen this stuff firsthand, and I know you said you're in Georgia right now, so you're not
Mhm.
kind of like at the ground zero of New York or whatever, but you're still
Right.
seeing cases come in. So do you want to talk a little bit about like what is it that you're seeing? What should we really worry about? What do we need to pay attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing to kind of recognize is This is a virus that started in Wuhan, China, which is especially notable for selling various types of wild animals that are all stacked on top of each other. And so the virus is originally thought to come from bats that then hopped over to a kind of like mammalian anteater, I feel, and then it popped back over to humans. And so because of that journey that the virus took, we originally had this theory that, okay, the virus came out of there and then it spread everywhere from then on. But retrospectively, looking back at the data, you could see that Bill Gates, when he was starting to do some of his flu research, also found earlier evidence of coronavirus type elements in society already. Now, we didn't exactly place it at the time that it was going to become a pandemic or something, but there were hints of that. If you look over at Seattle, Washington, you start to see that the virus is in different strains. Some have come from Europe, some we can trace back to Wuhan, China, some have come from other places and are kind of endemic to the county. So the virus is kind of mutating as it goes along.
Yeah.
The classic symptoms we really start to see in people is fevers, cough, shortness of breath, congestion, and some runny nose. There are a few atypical symptoms that you might get, some chest pain related to a myocarditis, some nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea related to a GI type infection. And it can also affect the eyes too if you're coughing on each other.
Hmm. One thing that I think we talked about this before, every time for those listening in the audience, every time I'd have an issue or something happened medically and we were happening to talk, I would always be asking these questions like, hey, what do you think about this? Is this the right case? Because obviously I trust you and I know you're qualified to at least provide some kind of more knowledgeable information. And
Oh, yeah,
so,
it's absolutely so hard to stay on top of the information. We are getting
yeah,
daily
daily
something new.
information changes every single day. And you guys are still
Mhm.
learning, we said, as you go, right? Every day you're learning something new.
Right, yeah.
But
So,
I think one joke that we had back in the day, back when you visited me in college, was like everyone tries to go to WebMD and self-diagnose, and they're like, I don't need a doctor. I already know what's wrong. Google told me. But one thing that I always find is that no matter what sickness you have, you could Google it on WebMD, and it's like a lot of the symptoms kind of overlap, like coughing, flu-like symptoms. So you're wondering, do I actually have a flu, or is it this COVID-19 stuff, or is it allergies? You know, some people allergies are driving them crazy right now, and they're not sure are these symptoms or not.
absolutely. And with the advent of allergy season, they are feeling shortness of breath. They're feeling the wheezing if they have asthma, the allergic rhinitis symptoms, and hay fever. And I've definitely seen a bunch of that in the clinic. And sorting through those two problems has been, it's kind of a routine day's work trying to sort out between allergic and infectious
Right.
symptoms for people. But overall, I do sense a greater sense of panic coming from patients that, it is the season, they're used to feeling bad, but they're just wondering, they're on edge.
Yeah.
So the most important thing that probably I can do in those situations is be helpful, give some information, and also kind of be somebody else for them to kind of like, just show up to and vent to and get that frustration or sense of panic or fear out of the way.
Absolutely. And another thing that really stood out to me this morning when we were speaking, and I really do admire you for this, I'm kind of like how a Marine or a soldier would run towards battle. You were saying how you feel like you're not being utilized fully right now, and that you kind of want to go to New York almost and just be of help and be of service over there. Whereas most of us would probably want to run away and just stay safe and shelter in place. You want to actually go and help. So I guess, is that a sentiment that most of your peers and other doctors share?
It's a mixed bag.
Okay.
Going into medicine, some of us have a sense of duty, obligation, this really that I joined because it's a calling, and I'm here to be as helpful as possible to the extent that you're self-sacrificing. Not maybe not everything. Like I'm not going to kill myself, but
Right.
I might give myself a little bit of a sickness in order to fulfill a greater purpose. Bill Gates kind of talks about it. He's like, I'd happily spend $1 billion to save the world trillions, and I think that's kind of the greater good. That's the best way to look at it. I think the hardest part that really kind of interferes with altruism is the safety, personal safety, safety for your family and friends with not having enough PPE, including masks, gowns, gloves, um, and being in a situation where you want to be as helpful as possible. But I think you also have to understand, as a healthcare worker, you yourself are a resource.
Right.
if you get compromised, your longevity of your career, but your ability to help is also compromised.
That's challenging because yeah, the more people that get sick, the less people we have on the front lines being able to help, and
Hmm.
it's an invaluable resource. I think I made a comment on a recent podcast episode that to focus on what you can control. So I was like, obviously, I don't have the training or the medical school background to have any kind of reasonable contribution towards the cure at this point, and it would take too long for me to figure out how to do that at this point in time. So there are people who are trained and who are looking at those problems, but at the same time, those people who have gone through the school and you've spent years doing all these things and training over experienced people's shoulders and things like that, if you guys are being compromised or being sick and having to fall back a little bit, then there's no way for us to be able to quickly, replace you, right? Or
And
catch other people up.
that's definitely something we're starting to feel. I think it's a sentiment shared by all that healthcare is in the United States is extremely fractured for how like unified we definitely all thought we were in terms of sharing information, sharing resources, being able to funnel things in the right direction.
Mhm.
Um, Everyone is kind of an independent entity. So when there is a big national emergency, if you're the military and you're going to war, you just can recruit a whole army from another base and immediately launch it there. And so that's one of the best parts about the military is their discipline and their efficiency and effectiveness.
Right.
With healthcare, we're all on the same team in spirit, but are we all on the same team in infrastructure?
Yeah. Different systems. I'm sure there's different systems that talk to each other different ways and different suppliers for procuring these types of things that we need. So I guess there may be opportunities and things coming up in the future just to streamline in some of the ways that you guys communicate across the country. Because like we were talking about earlier, this is the first time in our lifetime where we're having to face something that's actually affecting the entire globe like this
Hmm.
versus just having a localized issue like a Hurricane Harvey in Houston or a Katrina in New Orleans or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And those are geographic limitations to how many people were really infected or influenced.
Right.
And so it became so much easier to just kind of take a bunch of resources from all of the other healthy aspects of the nation and funnel it down there. Now what you have is a situation where everyone has a threat of being compromised. But New York is, ground zero now again.
Yeah. That's definitely pretty crazy, but it's awesome to see that there's professionals out there like yourself that are maintaining a level head and you're attacking the problem from a logical standpoint and you're making sure to not induce fear in others and to make sure, hey, do the right thing, wear a mask out there if you need to and just social distance, but don't be freaking out and just spreading the fear across the nation and the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably the most important thing is we all just need to approach this with a level head and make logical, reasonable decisions in terms of how we protect ourselves and also our fellow citizens. And so thank you so much for that nice compliment.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. No, I appreciate it because every time we have these talks, I'm always very surprised. We don't talk for like a year or something at a time because we just kind of life gets in the way, and
Yeah.
then we catch up, and then we talk for 3 hours in one day. So I'm
Yeah, I
really
know.
excited to just have this conversation. So you mentioned to obviously exercise precautions and to do the right things. There's mixed things out there like we've heard. Do you have any recommendations on what people should do right now in the US or even outside of the US? I mean, how do we
So
protect ourselves? Obviously stay inside as much as we can.
yeah, so there are a few recommendations that have already been released by the CDC, and also several governments have released recommendations. At this point, I think a lot of the states are not exactly releasing the same set of rules and guidelines to follow. But I think you should kind of start at the top with the most important thing: one, social distancing. What that means is not that you have to worry about everyone in your household, and staying away from them, because you could be a carrier. But what it does mean is for like the neighborhood around you, you want to stay about 6 feet away from everyone else. Don't leave the house unless you absolutely have to. And then when you are trying to eliminate, if you are in a sort of compromising position, for example, you leave the house, you get out of your car, and you have to go do something, try and wear a mask. There are several types of masks out there, beginning with cloth. There are allergy masks, and then there are viral protective masks, and then there are medical masks. The best mask that any layperson or citizen can wear is something that they fashioned at home. And there are several YouTube video sites talk about what material to use, what level of effectiveness they are, and then how to go ahead and stitch that up with the basic sewing kit.
Awesome. I've seen
Yeah.
some people doing that on social media, friends. Even now with me being in real estate, a lot of real estate agents are creating similar types of things, or even people who are familiar with sewing are creating these to assist because there's not enough equipment out there for people in the medical field, right?
Yeah, it's a fantastic response by society just to kind of stand up and fulfill the need and just step up and be kind of their own, be our heroes basically for healthcare providers uh,
Yeah.
to do that sort of stuff. I also want to add on two additional things. One is wash your hands. Obviously, you don't need to be OCD about it. You know, if you touch something else, wash your hands. Touch this, wash your hands. But make sure you are doing it whenever you feel like you've been compromised, and also before you touch your face. That's super
Yeah.
important.
I've been
Second
very
thing is,
conscious of that lately. It's something
yeah.
that you don't think about because I'm always like, I get an eyelash in my eye and you want to take it out and you're like, I don't know. I need to wash my hands first, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is kind of a hindrance. It's a nuisance. And then the last thing is making sure that you're washing contact surfaces that you're using a lot. You know, handles, entrances into your car, your steering wheel. Pay a little bit more attention to those sorts of things. I think it can have a pretty good impact because we know the viruses survives on surfaces.
Yeah, that's scary. I've
Mhm.
Me being in real estate, I have seen a few homes that are vacant and whatnot. I know real estate is considered an essential service in Houston and maybe some other places as well. Where I've got clients who they have to move, their lease is up or their house was just sold and they've got to move out. So it's very weird to navigate through these challenging times. And there are some new rules being put out and there is some leniency available for those who aren't able to make their rent or things like that. But all in all, if you touch something, just make sure to wash your hands. I've
Mhm.
been wiping down steering wheel, like my keys. I think of anything I could have possibly touched at a house, like a doorknob, and then my keys, and then my steering wheel, and the thing to put it in, the little gear shift to put it in drive.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
so many little things that we don't even think about. So those are very, very good tips. And I know we wanted to also talk about some of your journey so far, the med school, the challenges you've overcome, so that we could have a little bit of the coronavirus update. Is there anything else you thought was relevant to the audience to know for the coronavirus other than washing your hands and just maintaining self distance?
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about my own personal experiences with a
Yeah,
few patient encounters,
let's do that because I
just to
think a
kind of
lot
round
of
it out.
people still think that it's hocus pocus, and then some people are blowing it out of proportion. So I think you'll be able to provide some good, honest ground zero talk. What have you seen?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not going to reveal any specific patient identification, but I'll give you kind of some brief summaries
Yeah,
of the cases that have been going on. I took care of several patients. You know, most of the patients that we see coming in who are going to test coronavirus positive, or we're seeing them in the clinic. They just have mild fevers, cough, cold symptoms. You know, they can be well managed at home. But also in the hospital, what we're doing is we're testing those who are symptomatic, who we think, have the typical pneumonia-like presentation that we're anticipating. But that, the graphs that I'm seeing in the CDC of this is affecting and killing 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds, I definitely have those patients, but I've also got a good spread of young people, 50s, 40s, 30-year-old, who have, some comorbidities, but otherwise healthy, just like you and I. You wouldn't think that they would be at any further risk of death tomorrow, but they need to be hospitalized. They need to be put on oxygen and be prepared to intubate them. And it's shown that the virus is really affecting everyone, whether it's a hospital stay, whether it's a visit to a healthcare provider, or a trip to the ICU. Everyone is needing more resources in this situation if you get sick. The opposite has also been true in that I've seen tons of people who have tested positive, meaning they're expressing the virus. They don't have the immunity yet to suppress it, so they're still contagious, but they're asymptomatic, totally asymptomatic, and innocently, going around and being themselves, doing the things that they normally do, but getting other people sick, and they become vectors. So it's a spread. It is definitely a spread. And I think that's why we're in a situation in the community where if you have the ability, definitely start wearing masks because you just never know who is a carrier.
yeah, that's so scary. I think we talked about this earlier. I still can't wrap my head around it. I mean, I didn't take a whole lot of science classes, and it's been a while since I took biology in high school or whatever. But just the fact that something can be so dangerous and contagious and you can't even see it, wiping down surfaces and things like that. I mean, we all know to wash our hands, but we've all also seen the people who walk out of the bathroom stall and they don't wash their hands and they just leave. And you're like, that's gross. But now you really understand the implications of that once something like this happens, and germs can
Yeah,
spread so quickly.
it's one of the reasons why I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think the world, the WHO and everything else has basically outlawed biological warfare for that reason.
Yeah,
You know,
that's what I've heard
trying to
as well.
trying to create vectors that create like military disturbances and create sickness across people, because it is exactly like what you're talking about. It's fighting an invisible man.
Yeah. It's still so hard to wrap my head around. And I remember hearing those at the beginning, those, conspiracy theorists thinking that maybe it was some kind of weaponized virus. But one person said like nature can create something way better than we can at this point, where it is just like a byproduct of something in nature that is causing this. But
Yeah,
yeah, thank you so much for that information. And
no problem.
everybody listening, wash your hands. Like, go ahead out and just pause this and go wash your hands, or wash it while you're
Get out of
while
your
you're
system
listening.
now. The minute you
Yeah,
start talking about it, the more you want to wash your hands, just to be like, keep your mind at peace. I get it.
yeah. And there's still some people who just don't even believe it's true. I think we talked about this earlier as well, where I went to the nutrition store to restock on a couple supplements, and they had some rules in place where you can point to what you want and they'll put it all in the bag. And I told the guy, "Hey, how does this work?" I just point to what I want, and he was like, "Yeah, it's stupid." Like he was just dismissing this as if it's nothing, which is kind of how I felt about a month ago. I was like, "Yeah, is this a big deal? Am I going to get sick?" And now I'm kind of more like, "Dude, I'm not touching it. You put that in the bag. Keep your
Mm,
6 feet. Let me
right.
pay, and I'm going to wipe everything down when I get home because I'm not trying to
Mhm.
take any chances."
Yeah, that's good both for your protection and for theirs.
Absolutely, because I don't want
Yeah.
to be responsible for passing something to somebody else or getting something, especially bringing that back to my household. Like I said, I've got a roommate. She's got a 2-year-old. Like a lot can go wrong in that situation. So
Mhm.
I guess if we want to shift gears a little bit, I want to see how we can talk a little bit more about your journey and the challenges you've overcome. I think this will relate a lot to the entrepreneurs listening who they may have started something or 6 months in, one year in, they're frustrated. They felt like they'd be further along. And I mean, as long as I can remember, you've been pursuing this medical path. So you know about staying consistent and showing up every day for how many years have you been doing this total now in your
Oh
journey?
God. 4 years med school, 3 years residency. So I guess 7 years, and I have another 3 years of fellowship left. So all said and done, 10 years minimum.
10
I'll have
years
committed to
minimum.
just the process of education and training.
And you've seen some crazy stuff, I'm sure. And I
Yeah.
guess for most of the medical professionals that I talk to, they end up seeing things that most people in society don't ever really see. And you get very comfortable with it because you've got to help people deal with these problems that they have and do surgeries. And you said, what is it that you're going to be focusing on? If you could enlighten our audience here once you're finished with all of that.
Yeah. So the plan right now is just to become a cardiologist,
Okay.
whether I want to do interventional or EP or heart failure, subspecialized further, or just stay general cards. I'm not really sure just yet, but we'll see. I'll get a better idea once I actually start fellowship for sure.
Absolutely. And you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier that your goals from before when you first started are definitely a lot different than they were now. And that's the case for all of us. If I told you my goals 10 years ago, it was probably to be like a pro skateboarder or like a drummer playing at Warp Tour or something. And
Yeah.
now I don't even really play drums very much, right? So
Well, I
things
mean, you're
change.
you're super talented, so I don't feel like those are unreasonable goals. It's
Thank
not
you.
like
Thank you.
someone trying to be an astronaut. I mean, even that,
Hey,
those for
it
some people, those are
happens.
attainable goals.
Yeah, yeah. I saw one meme of some guy who's like, "Hey, this guy was an astronaut. He scored a perfect score on his SAT, and he was an NFL player." There was some guy who just he did three amazing things. But I think the underlying the thing that's most important here is that you can be good at something and you can succeed at whatever you set your mind to. But just because you were good at something when you were younger, like you play guitar, I played drums, maybe we're not so passionate about that now. We know we only have so many hours in the day, so I don't necessarily want to play the drums for 2 or 3 hours when I can just read books or create a podcast or talk to friends like you and just record a conversation, right? So, how have
Yeah.
your goals changed over the years, and where is it that you see yourself going in 5 to 10 years?
I think goals are something that are super crucial for everyone to just kind of establish. Setting goals for ourselves are really the catalyst to success. And a lot of people, they want to be successful, but they don't have a specific tangible goal that's measurable in terms of it's outcome. Like throughout this whole process, I've had long-term goals, but they were the most abstract thing. At some point, it was just like, I just want to be like smart, or I want to be paid well, or I want to help
Right.
people. That's kind of where it starts when you're a child or growing up through education. And then at some point, it's just like, I just need to get like a good SAT score, and that's your goal. And it's
It's very
tangible, but it's
broad.
like meaningless. Like, what is intrinsically, what value does an SAT score have by itself,
Right.
right? Because it's just a thing. It's a goal, but like becoming a doctor, I kind of got the idea because I got exposure as an EMT basic back when I was an undergrad. I was helping ride around in the ambulance and helping the paramedics kind of do just like a little bit of stuff here and there. I wasn't totally involved up until I was like part of a code, and just being like the lowest man on the totem pole of that whole operation, it made me want to be more like invested into it, because I saw how much it could change a person's like life, a situation, like a family situation, and how meaningful and impactful it was. And that got me hooked, honestly. And that's when I started getting in healthcare. But it's hard to say that just graduating from medical school is an abstract goal, but it is, right?
Right.
Like there are different types of doctors. There's pathologists, radiologists, surgeons, cardiologists. So that took a little bit more time in med school, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds about all of the nitty gritty, but I do really want to emphasize for everyone that goals are dynamic, and the more you put yourself out there and get experience and get exposure and become introspective during those experiences to know what really makes you happy or sad, and you pick goals that really define you and who you are. Like I've always thought that my biggest strengths was that I was hardworking, I was disciplined, and I was sincere, and I was really good at physics and math and like understanding that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So cardiology felt like a natural fit, right? I'm not really necessarily the best at like having long drawn out conversations or getting to know someone's soul. And I know it's kind of funny to laugh at, but like it's some people are really really good at that and they become psychiatrists,
Yeah.
And so I never set goals that weren't who I was going to be or who I was at the time.
And I think that's definitely something that's challenging. I've gotten a lot more clarity in the last year or two on goals. I do have a laminated sheet of paper that I look at every single morning with some of my 5-year goals that I set a year ago, and even coming up with a list of things that I want to see for myself in 5 years. It was very difficult to wrap my head around, I said
Mhm.
I want within 5 years I want to have 100,000 monthly downloads of my podcast. I want to make X amount of dollars passively per month. I think I said $10,000 of passive income a month. And I actually read it and I run my fingers over the goals as I read it so that it just like stays in my mind and I'm absorbing it as much as I can. And I've got these little cues everywhere. Just here on my whiteboard, I have affirmations and things like I'm so grateful and thankful, and I love how much money I have in my life. So no matter what, if I have $10 in the account or 100,000 or a million, I want to be able to be grateful for what I have. And I've got to
Mhm.
set reminders constantly because, like we talked about earlier, at the end of the day, it's money's great. It's a tool. You can buy nice things, you can eat nice meals, but after a certain point, more money doesn't necessarily make you happier. It's more about the experiences, and we have to know our why as well. More important than the goals is like, why are we doing what we're doing? So sounds like you're doing what you're doing because you love that feeling of helping people, of saving lives, of impacting others. And that is your underlying why and why you want to go down this path, right?
Yeah, it's intrinsically my passion to do every day what I do. I almost never view it as work, and maybe
That's awesome.
that's maybe not the best at times, but for me, I just show up and I'm like, I'm here to help. What can we do today?
And that's the
Um,
way it should be, because if you feel like it's work, it's almost like there's that there's that feeling towards work. Oh, I have to go to work. It seems
yeah.
like a drag. It seems like something it seems like something you have to do just to pay the bills.
Mhm.
Whereas if you actually enjoy it and it doesn't feel like work, it's almost as if you're going to go participate in an organization that you actually love to be a part of. So
Yeah,
it's almost like
exactly.
a happy hour or something.
Yeah, you gotta have, and I can tell basically from the things that you've been describing and how enthusiastic you are about your podcast that you have a passion and you've set a goal of achieving so many viewers. But that isn't just like kind of an abstract thing. That's like this means this is how you're defining, the steps to which you have like a successful podcast. They're able to put out so much information out there. And
Definitely.
when you're passionate about something, those goals just kind of they start to manifest and they start to make sense.
Absolutely. And you can always tweak the goals too. I think it's exciting to
Mhm.
see when you write the goals down and you blow past them or you're definitely on track to hit those goals. You can set new goals. And I think I mentioned earlier as well, one of my goals when I was in elementary school, I had a friend and we used to talk all the time. We'd do sleepovers and we talked about living in an RV somewhere and hunting like man-eating plants or flowers or something. And things are definitely different now where that's nowhere on my goals list. My goals lists are more like, hey, speaking on stage in front of thousands of people, impacting people positively. So, how you're impacting people and saving lives, I'd like to change people as well and help them maybe more with their mental health and believing more in themselves. And so, I think the thing that we both share here is that it feels good to help others, and
Mhm,
that's something that people who are at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, like the self-actualization and stuff, they
mhm.
realize that after they hit a certain, level of wealth and they've got everything taken care of, it food, shelter, water, safety, all of those things, now they want to give to others because that's the next logical step to fulfill whatever happiness it is that they seek.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you definitely don't want to get to a point where you've met all of your own needs and then let your greed consume your goals.
Right. Where
Because
you're
I've
not
seen that
helping
too.
anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, dude, like maybe you need to restart from the bottom of like what you need to be happy. Like let's start there rather than trying to get greedy and steal from other people or not be helpful. And that's kind of the way I would define it. Is if you're just out there pursuing money, it's going to be very very hard for you to actually find success. Just pursue your passion and success will come.
And of course you have to work some jobs and pay some bills and things like that in between. We're not
Mhm.
saying you can
Lights
just,
on.
yeah,
Yeah,
you got to keep the lights on, you got to pay the bills.
yeah.
And like you said, now you're stashing away some money, you're making you're still saving and you got some money in stocks and you're not living in poverty, but you're not also, going, ham, going out every weekend and spending money on things that you don't necessarily need. So I think that's another very important takeaway from our conversation this morning is to make sure to live within your means and have a plan. You're spending time right now, whenever you have downtime, reading up on investing and teaching yourself
Mhm.
new skills and things that a lot of people in the medical field don't necessarily learn. You don't have a class on managing your finances, right?
Well, that's the easiest way to stay sane, I think, during this time is just view this as like time for yourself that you wouldn't have otherwise had.
Yes.
Right? Like, and it's in a situation where you have to be socially visible all the time, like, meeting with your family and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying don't see your family, but I am saying is like some of those by default, those, wide array of social interactions, you're at home, but view that as time that you could reinvest in yourself. And that'll keep it in a positive light and keep you people from just feeling demoralized.
Absolutely. And I'm saying right now is like such a great time to have to stay at home. We've got it really fast internet, we've got Netflix, we've got distractions, but also there's online courses. There's just like there's as many cat videos on YouTube, there's videos on YouTube teaching you how to invest in the stock market, how to invest in real estate, how to become a better public speaker, how to start a podcast, anything you can think of. And I find myself when I'm about to ask a question that I like to say there's no such thing as a stupid question, but sometimes there's some borderline questions where you're like, dude, come on, Google that. And my parents are guilty. They'll ask me, how do you do this? And I always want to make a smart comment, but I kindly remind them, Google's going to explain it better than I can. Okay.
Mhm.
So we live in a day in time where almost anything, yeah, basically anything you can think of, you can get answered on the internet to some extent. And you might end up going down a weird rabbit hole in a weird niche forum to learn some kind of mathematical equation that, most people aren't looking at. But this is definitely the best time to have to be stuck at home because we've got access to so much. And I
That's
think about even
absolutely
our
true.
parents, right? They had to go to the library and look at the punch card system or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Open up big dictionaries, find different indices, find like, the physical books that were like the encyclopedias of the time. And
I
now
know.
we all have that at like clicks and we just take that for granted.
Oh yeah, my roommate for Christmas, I think she gave my parents an Alexa, and now my parents can ask, what's the weather, or they can ask any random question, and the smart home device will answer it for them and tell you what the temperature is outside, and it's just incredible. We don't even have to type stuff anymore. We can just ask it.
Yeah. it's made our lives so much easier, all this technology. But I would say like the biggest thing that you could think about now is, if you do have free cash, you could think about relative changes that you can make to your life to upgrade them. Brainstorm, really work on yourself. Like, um, I mean, I'm doing a big move that's coming up in a couple of months because I am moving back to Houston, and I'm already thinking about like, okay, how do I want to like set up this place? What kind of technology am I going to have there? Am I going to have a smart thermostat or a Nest or something like
Yeah.
that? Do I want the light bulbs that change color? And not necessarily that, I just want to like splurge a whole bunch of money, but sometimes like you do need things that make your life easier. Like you're saying, Alexa, uh,
Yeah.
just like play. Sometimes if it's just nice, if it just like plays, John Legend in the morning while you're like making breakfast.
No, it's funny because behind me I have this little JBL Flip 4, whatever. It's a Bluetooth speaker. And anytime we're cooking, I almost want to pull it out and set it up to start playing music. But I noticed, okay, when you're cutting chicken and you've got, dirty hands, you don't want to be touching your phone and things. And now we can just tell Alexa to play some certain song hands free while you're cutting up chicken and cooking food. And so now it's almost rendered that useless because I don't have to plug in and connect it and pick the song on Spotify on my phone. I can just tell the smart device to play something or play a podcast or whatever it is that I want. So
Yeah, that's true. People are saying like, we're not innovating as much as we used to before with all this. I just don't see that.
yeah, I mean, the lazier we can get, the more we have been innovating, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
It's all about coming to a life of convenience because, yeah, it's nice if you don't have to make your own coffee. The coffee machine makes your cup of coffee in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Man,
Um,
so what else is new? What else do you want to talk about? I mean, I know you've got so much knowledge in your brain, and I gotta ask the right questions to pry it out. But is there anything that you want to talk about in particular that you think could be helpful that you learned in the last year or two? Any breakthroughs that you've had mindset wise?
let's let's not me talk about like overcoming obstacles.
Let's not.
No,
Okay, what do you want to talk about?
let's do that. Let's
Oh,
talk
let's
about
do that. Okay, I thought you said
overcoming
let's not.
obstacles.
Okay, I was like, okay, so what are
No.
you talking about?
And let me kind of
So
flip this on its head. Like, what are some things or obstacles that you've overcome in your life?
that I've overcome.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're flipping it on its head. So for those who've listened to my podcast before, and for those who are listening for the first time, I'll go through one of the biggest ones. And this is something that you're aware of as well. When I quit my oil and gas job, I have a little prototype behind me in the camera. It's a little blue thing there, if you can see it. It's the bottle that I made, like a supplement organizer. And so I'd say that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I've personally faced of like posting on social media. Hey, this is the thing that I'm going to do. Everyone go like this website, go subscribe for our email list, and kind of just going all in on this thing that took a lot more time and money than I expected. And then I basically had to get a job again because I didn't have the money. And it was kind of embarrassing in a way where I was like, man, people are going to think I'm a failure and I failed at this thing and it didn't work like I thought. And I'm always very optimistic and positive. So I maintained a good face throughout. And I admitted up to it too. When I started the podcast, I was very open about, hey, I tried this thing. It didn't work. I didn't just like hide it and delete it
Now,
from
was that the first time you had a failure in your life, would you say?
that's the first time I would say that's definitely other than some tests in school. I think I got like a 35 on a test in college and I was like, whoa, welcome to college. I got to study more than the night before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's just like a wake up call, though. That's not like it's like failure
Yeah.
in college, like failing, like fail.
Yeah. So I'd say that's the first big failure that I've had because kind of like how you said you never really had these big goals. They were always very vague. That was how I was. I was just like, okay, I'm going to go to school, graduate, get a job, done, done, done. I think I'm done with life, right? And it wasn't until I started setting bigger goals that I was like, okay, I'm going to create this thing. I'm going to sell it. And that was the first time I had really kind of set a goal for myself and failed. And it was definitely like a little painful and I learned a lot, but at the same time it didn't make me just quit and go back to a job and kind of just, you know, never pursue my dreams again, which I think is important to know. And I'd say that's been my biggest failure so far, but even then I frame it as a learning experience because like we talked about this morning, I haven't given up on it. It's just on the back burner for now while I focus on real estate, which has been gaining more traction for me and helping me build up my wealth and stuff again. So it's more of an experience, not necessarily like a huge setback, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I spent money, I spent time. It took time to save up 30, $40,000 that I just put into that thing. That it's not like a house that I can just sell. Like
Hmm.
who am I gonna does anyone want these big steel tools that make this part that isn't
Right.
selling anywhere, right? I can't just sell it. So that was definitely the hardest part for me. Are there any other questions you have on that, like how I handled it or managed forward? Because this is kind of cool, flipping the.
Oh, well, yeah, I just meant like what lessons did you really kind of gather from that experience?
Yeah,
And
so
do you think
lessons.
it makes you a different person now than you were pre-failure?
I think so. I mean, and kind of like we talked about earlier in this episode, money I feel like isn't everything, and that was my mindset going in. Maybe I was a little too optimistic. Maybe I didn't do enough due diligence, and I was just, yeah, I got the money. Let's try it. Let's try it. What's the worst that can happen? I lose it. I have to move in with my parents and I start over. That didn't seem too bad to me because I was at that age where I was young enough. Like this is the time to take the risk. I don't have kids. I don't have a family to support.
Hmm.
And so I say, I guess I still don't have kids now. I mean, this couple of years later, still don't have kids. I mean, I have a mortgage, which I could always sell the house if I have to, right? If anything's changed from now and then, if I had to do it again, I'd probably be a little more cautious. I may have stayed in the job a bit longer until I built this side hustle up to a sustainable level because my thought was, hey, if I go all in on it, I can make it successful faster. But at the same time, I also burned the boats in a way where I had no income coming in. And so it made me more of that I have to make this happen, but I wasn't thinking as clearly anymore, you know? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does.
So if I had a steady income where it's like, cool, I may not have been as motivated or hungry because I'm making 4 or 5 grand steadily at my day job a month. But at the same time, I wouldn't have had to feel like my back's against the wall with a shortening runway because I could have had the resources to put back into the tooling or R&D or whatever.
You think next time if you're in a similar situation, it'd be like much more calm under the pressure?
Yeah, no, I think I was still very, very calm. And even I had a business partner who things didn't work out. I think I talked about this on 1 or 2 episodes ago. And when we decided to split ways, he maxed out the company credit card. He spent 10 grand, like PayPal'd it to himself, and he stopped paying. So basically, that was added to what I owed. And I didn't have the money at the time. My dad lent me the money, and I
Oh
had to
my
pay
god.
my dad back. So it was just even worse. I don't know. Money seems like this weird thing, right? Because a lot of people they don't like to spend. I looked at it as an investment, as a risk. So I
Mhm.
understand that you should never be willing to invest anything you're not willing to lose. So I had
Right.
that mindset, like, hey, this money could go to zero. I could never get it back, or I don't know, it could go to millions, hopefully in the future.
Yeah,
So
as long as it wasn't gonna become a financial catastrophe for you, you can
exactly.
assume some level of risk to pursue your goals.
Absolutely, because I mean, some people, the I think Robert Kiyosaki talks about this. The fear of losing outweighs the feeling of winning that people get. So people are more afraid to lose money than they are to risk something to gain money, and that causes a lot of people to not take action because they're just afraid of losing. So they're just hoarding all this money that they've saved, keeping it in a bank account or some secure investment, or they'll consider their primary residence an investment when really it's kind of a liability if you're not making any money off of it somehow by like renting a room out or something like that. If it's not bringing you income, it's kind of hard to call like a primary home or an investment, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I would say like, in vain with that line of thinking, the best way that I think about it is money is a resource for
Yep,
me to be able to do all the things that I want to get done. If I don't have
absolutely.
enough money, then yeah, I'll go earn more, like keep working or spend less here and there, something like that. But I have certain things in life that I really intend to do. You know,
Yeah. What
I
are
want
some of your big goals that you have
Yeah,
that
I
you'd
wanna
like
go
to
see
do?
all the wonders of the world. I wanna go to, like, Patagonia or Machu Picchu.
Same
I
here.
wanna, I wanna travel, I wanna see things, I wanna do things,
Those things definitely require money. Even though a lot of people don't realize how it doesn't really require that much money like you would think, especially when you start going to third world countries. Like you can live like a king. And we went to Bali, Indonesia, my girlfriend and I.
Uh-huh.
Dude, I think we spent like $1,500 like in 2 weeks. That was it for two people.
Yeah.
You
As
could
long
do
as
that
you're,
in
like,
like three
smart
days
about
in Hawaii.
it. Yeah. As long as you're smart about it, you use it effectively, and you spend what you think you're really gonna enjoy and no more.
Right.
Spending much more than, like, what you really need to kind of have a good time, um, that's probably where you get waste.
Yes.
and then it becomes that much more harder to manage money as a resource.
I agree. So I guess if we could turn the question around, what has been one of your biggest failures that, at least to date, that has set you back the most, maybe mentally or
Yeah, totally. The first would be going through medical school. Um, my biggest failure was that I dropped motivation, honestly, through medical school. To get into medical school, that was like a big goal for me to become a doctor. And then so once I got in, I was like, okay, I think I can pass. But like, what kind of doctor do I want to become? Do I want to go into education or academia, or do I want to be a professor? Do I want to work in a commuter rural place? I had no sense of direction. I had no passion anymore, and I definitely lost myself. I was having fun. I had friends. I had a social life. I was going on vacations, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I've obviously worked and passed and did all that kind of stuff, but I would say like almost just barely.
so you were
I
kind of
did,
doing like the bare minimum almost to just get
yeah,
through?
exactly. And I don't think that there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but I look at it back in my life as like a failure because I could have been so much more productive early on. But I really lost my passion. And it wasn't until I was a fourth year medical student, I kind of regained my passion. And I really wanted to become a cardiologist after working with like some of the most phenomenal doctors ever. And for me, that was like, oh shit, this is what I want to do with my life. Also, it is one of the most competitive things a doctor can do in terms of like line of training. And I was
Yeah,
like, oh, my grades aren't good enough to be, to really get this position, or like I maybe not going to have the letters of recommendation that I need and to really set myself up to do this super well at the time.
right. What do I
It's like
do?
imagine like I don't know, like you're like all of a sudden you realize like your inner dream or passion is to become president of the United States, and you're just like, oh fuck, like I've spent 30 years
I'm
doing that.
behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. One entrepreneur I follow, Tom Bilyeu, he's the founder of Impact Theory and Quest bars, if you're familiar with those. He
Mhm.
said he got smart enough to realize how much smarter a lot of other people are than him. And he felt like it was some kind of like purgatory where he was just smart enough to realize like how much smarter other people were that he's met, like an Elon Musk or those types of people. So it is
Yeah.
funny, like when you have that realization of, sure, you can say, oh, I'd like to be a millionaire. I'd like to be, this huge real estate investor or whatever kind of surgeon in the future. It sounds great when you're a kid, but once you start to realize, like, oh, these are all the things that are required to get to that level. And
Right.
I've been dabbling instead of just, 100% in.
Yeah.
So it
So
seems like you had that eureka moment a little late, but hey,
yeah,
don't we
and
all, right?
it was never a catastrophe. I do consider it a failure in my life. But it's probably one of those like mild failures, more of a setback. But then when I started medical school, I mean, started residency, from day one, I hit the ground running.
Yeah.
Uh, and I never let anything kind of stand in my way to make myself better every single day. Like the way you describe reading every day, I was doing that. Every single day, I
Awesome.
was watching lectures, reading a book, and daily committing myself to things that sucked. Like on nice days outside, I would be like in a dungeon, getting through a
Reading.
biostatistics book and really grinding out some boring ass, things that I know are going to be tested. And no one wants to be in that position. But I was like, I'm going to hate myself now, but I'll hate myself even more in 3 years if I'm not at my goal.
I love that. That's a very important mindset to have. And I think if you go back to the why and you really focus on why are you doing all of this, I think there's a quote that says, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." So once you have that why dialed in and you know why you want to do something, you can start to adjust the things in your life and you can start to turn up the motivation. And because that is a very hard place to be. I've, for some reason, over the last few years, and I think you've probably seen the change in me as well, I've
Mhm.
become more motivated, more self-driven somehow. And people ask, how do you maintain it? Because I'll sometimes meet people who are not motivated at all. They're just glued to the couch. They can't leave their mom's house. They just live there and they're okay with it. And I'm just like so frustrated because just seeing them in that position makes me wonder, like, how can someone just sit there and let life happen to them instead of try to take control? So I think you have to switch that thing in your mind almost, where you switch that gear and you start to fire on a different level that you had never been on before. which it sounds
Yeah.
like that's where you're operating from now. And that's where I'm hoping to operate from now as well.
Yeah, I'm in a really good place in my career and life right now, and I'm
That's
so
awesome,
happy and
man.
thankful to be here. But it's not all like natural talent for sure.
No, a
I'm
lot of
like,
hard work.
yeah, I'm smart, but more than that, I'm super hardworking, and I'm willing to just like get shit done and not be happy for like 2 3 days in a row, just to reinvest in myself to make sure that I'm better every single day. And but the thing is, like when you're a doctor, sometimes it's so easy to do that because you get tough cases, you have tough patients, or you have families that are really depending on you. And so it's one of the best things because daily you have like a living human breathing person who's your reminder for why you need to be better. And it was really cool. It was super cool. I was watching this JAMA podcast, which is the Journal of the American Medical Association, and this guy was talking about progress in medicine and how it's really a trade-off between being able to take care of the person in front of you and learning enough about the case that you're taking care of to make the next case that much more better and efficient and effective. So yes, while every day we're trying to, take care of people and fight fires, there's also a simultaneous battle to progress the field or progress yourself as a practitioner so
Right.
that you're better the next day.
That's incredible. That's definitely that makes you look at things a little differently instead of like, oh, this is the way we've always done it, which is the case with so many different industries. You have to always innovate. How can you make things better? How can you do it faster, more cost effectively? So even things that are no longer issues now, like polio. I mean, my dad suffered from polio as a kid in India or something,
Oh,
and
wow.
he's got one shoulder that's like very weak and the muscles just like gone. Basically, you could see the bone pop out a little bit and he's okay, but like he doesn't really throw a ball with that arm and he doesn't lift heavy things with that arm. And that's something that in today's day and age, like we don't really deal with. We're like, what is that? What is polio? We don't really see it here in like America and stuff.
Mhm.
So that's just an example of how we need to continue to improve over time so that people in the future can enjoy a better quality of life than we have now. And hopefully that can continue to be the case.
Yeah. So hopefully that maybe kind of answers your question. Is probably a tweeny identity crisis looking back at it. But
That's
no,
hard, man.
as well.
Tweeny crisis or crises. You're trying to find yourself, man.
At some point, I'm sure you'll be in your 40s, and like none of
It'll
us
happen again.
will stop failing, But
Yeah.
you can maybe have a bigger failure, and you'll look back at yourself now and be like, oh, like I thought that was a failure. Like it's really nothing,
Yeah.
You've recovered from it.
And the thing is too, it's important to ask yourself what's instead of just asking what's the worst that can happen, because that puts fear in your mind of all the bad things that could happen. I think it's important to ask what's the best thing that can happen because a lot of us don't let us see our we don't let ourselves see the possible upside of trying something new, of going out of our comfort limit. And a lot of times it's like, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Okay, I lose money, I got to sell the house, my parents take me in for 6 months while I get a job and figure things out. That doesn't seem so bad. And then what's the worst thing that can happen if you're trying to do cross a Grand Canyon with on a tightrope without any safety gear? That could end up pretty badly. Or have you seen Free Solo? That guy's crazy.
That's
He
insane.
he
Yeah, yeah,
made it, but that could have ended very badly if he sneezed or slipped or whatever. So
yeah.
ask yourself what's the worst thing that can happen, but also ask what's the best thing that could happen because that will help you take action during times when you're maybe paralyzed by fear of the unknown.
Yeah, like I don't think that anybody should really kind of define themselves by the outcome of things, but you should
Right.
definitely define yourself about the decision you choose to make in various situations. Do you want to see the upside? Do you want to look at the positives, or are you gonna, get depressed, say, look at only the negatives, and kind of spiral into a situation where you're paralyzed by fear or paralyzed by an inability to take control of problems.
Right. Well, dude, it sounds like we talked about quite a bit of stuff from relevant coronavirus situation and hygiene tips. Wash your hands to the other things like the mindset, because I think the medical profession and just the challenges that you've gone through, the lack of motivation at times, and then the reigniting that flame, so to say, in your fourth year. I think those are all things that we can all relate to of getting excited to do something like I was with that product. And then a year in, it's hard. And then I'm like, man, this sucks. And I don't want to post about it on social media anymore because I'm not passionate about it. And then finding something else to throw myself at, which is real estate and this podcast for me right now. So what is it that you see yourself doing in the next 5 or 10 years? Like where do you want to be? Maybe mentally, location wise? Do you see yourself living in Houston or
I don't exactly have a super clear picture just yet.
yeah, that's
Uh,
understandable. I mean,
yeah, because I'm not married. I don't have a serious girlfriend or kids or any dependents like that. I'm still pretty free. Um, but I think right now I have the maturity that the next goal that I set, it'll be what I really want
yeah,
because I'm better in tune with myself and what I do like and what I don't want to do. And at some point also I think um, when you're in the field of medicine, like your your goals are kind of accelerated, right? Like there are times where I work like 80-hour work weeks. Um, so all my career development has kind of happened in a short amount of time.
yeah, in
So
spurts.
so maybe some goals for myself would just be like I would want to be involved in as like a residency, like a teacher or something. That could be kind of cool if I was part of a training program in shaping the next generation of doctors. The other thing too is like maybe setting up my own practice at some point, maybe in 10 years, having my own space where I can kind of like run everything and make sure that people are getting good quality care. Um, but yeah, that's probably where my head's at for as
Awesome.
far as 10-year goals. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but
Yeah, no, that's the thing. As long as you have something in mind and you know where you want to get, you'll figure out how to get there. One entrepreneur I follow, he said, "Hey, whenever you're going on a road trip, you don't look at every single turn when you're sitting there in your driveway. You put it in your GPS and it tells you in 1 mile turn right. You know, you're figuring out the road as you go, but as long as you know where it is that you want to go, you'll kind of figure out, the detours and stuff that you have to take to get there. So
yeah, exactly.
well, awesome, man. I really loved this conversation with you. I'm glad we got to actually record it. I think we talked today for like 3 hours combined. So,
Yeah, it was a good session to catch up.
yeah, really
Maybe we
good
couldn't do this
session to
over a
catch
beer.
up. What was that?
It's a shame we couldn't do this over a beer.
Yeah, well, I guess we could. I think people are doing virtual happy hours on Zoom where you just bring your own beer.
Yeah, exactly. Next time.
Hey, but when you're in town and when this stuff gets back to a little more sort of normal, then we'll definitely have to go out and maybe go to a bar if that's allowed.
Yeah, for sure. That'll be so nice.
Awesome. Well, hey, Dr. Koduri, it was awesome having you on the show. And you have to get used to calling you Dr. Koduri now.
No, no, please don't. Only in the hospital.
No, that's so cool, man. If I were a doctor, I'd be like, hey, you got to call me doctor. But with that being said, is there any last nugget that you'd like to impart on the audience? Any quote or anything that you'd love to just leave the audience with before we go?
um, I think the biggest thing is just now, given the situation of the times, try and find, positives and be grateful for all the things that you do have rather than all the things that you don't have. And try and sincerely mean it.
Yeah,
We're in a situation where, yes, it's bad, but it could always be worse. And try and keep that in mind that like, you know, you still most people still have their health, and if you don't, send prayers and good thoughts to those who are fighting with the disease. um, but also take the time to spend time with your loved ones, to reinvest with yourself. And then when you're out there, make sure you're practicing good hygiene. If you can, wear a homemade mask, if you wash your hands, and above all else, like don't let obstacles never let obstacles stop you from your passion. Just look at them as things that you need to overcome.
I love that. That's such a good thing. And I didn't realize how big of an impact mindset had on you as well. I guess it's relevant for anyone, no matter what it is that you're doing. It's not necessarily like just the business owner. It's for anyone going through difficult times, like in med school or your career or finding yourself. So I love that. Don't let obstacles stop you. Just continue to push through
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of like be that person daily, though.
every
Uh,
day. Yeah,
yeah, if you like in 5 years, if you want to be someone who's fearless, you have to practice every day being a little bit more fearless than you were the day before.
absolutely.
So yeah, it's a
Very good advice.
it's a big
Well,
part of the training, and yeah, I'm really thankful to be at this position where I am, and I'm still looking forward to hanging out with you again when I come back to Houston.
Absolutely. Well, is there anything that you want to share, like your social media handles or anywhere where people connect? Yeah, I don't know if you have a website or anything up
Oh
yet.
shit, no, I'm not that famous.
You're not that famous.
Not yet.
Man, 5 or 10 years, a lot can change, right?
Yeah, we'll
I have
see.
a website and a podcast now that's somehow getting 40,000 downloads. That's only the last two and a half
You'll have to
years.
help me set that up.
I'll help you out, man. But yeah, if there's anywhere that you'd like people to go or to connect with you, or if anyone has any questions, of course, I don't know if you want to, I probably wouldn't do your personal email or phone number that could get blown up, but like Instagram or Facebook or anything that you want to share if you want.
Um, I do have an Instagram, but it's not like a medical Instagram. Like, and I
Yeah,
don't
just,
think people would like enjoy seeing pictures of my family and like nephews.
yeah, I guess it's cool if you don't want to share.
You know, if you went on my Facebook, you might see like my prom photos.
Yeah, you're not very active on social media,
No.
huh? Well, no worries. If you guys want to get a hold of him and you have any questions, you can also hit me up, and then I'll make introductions as I see fit or as makes sense. So
Yeah, let's do that. That
yeah,
makes sense.
let's go ahead and do that. And then if there's any connections or anything, you never know who's listening. Could be another doctor out there or somebody who wants to connect or network. So we could definitely, plug you in and connect you guys. But with that being said, man, it's been great connecting with you here again. Thanks so much for jumping on this podcast. This is your first podcast interview, right?
Yeah, ever in life. It's
Super
fun.
cool. You did really, really well. I guess it's just treated
Thanks.
like a conversation, like as if we're talking to each other, and it's very smooth and transitions well.
Yeah.
Yeah, awkward silence. No. Okay, well, we just ruined it. No, but cool, man. I'll definitely edit this and I'll post it to go live tomorrow if that's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Send me a link once it, or like just kind of message me once it goes live so I can tell people.